So the first thing we're going to look at is nominal morphology. You'll recall that morphe means form. So as we look at nominal morphology, the first concern that we have is figuring out what endings to add to our nouns to create the form that's desired to indicate the syntax that's needed for the role that the noun is going to play in the sentence. Let me explain what I mean. So if you guys remember, we have 5 declensions of nouns. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. And if you guys cast your minds back, you remember the way that you tell what declension a noun is by first looking it up in the dictionary and then looking at the second thing you're given in the dictionary. That second thing listed in the dictionary will tell you what declension a noun is. It's referred to as the genitive singular. Genitive is a case of possession, and it's roughly the equivalent of the apostrophe S in English. So if you look in the dictionary and the second form of the word given ends in AE, you know that you're looking at a first declension noun. If the second thing you're given in a dictionary ends in an I with a long mark over it, you know that you're looking at a second declension noun. If it ends in an IS, third declension, a US with a long U, fourth declension, and an EI, be careful to distinguish this from just the I of the second declension, you know that you're looking at a fifth declension noun. Adjectives are a little bit more complicated. Us, aum, aum, both make an adjective first, second declension. Pretty much anything else means that it's a third declension. However, if we want to practice this, we have only to look at the previous slide that we were just looking at. Here we have some of the phrases that occur in our reading, adjectives joined with nouns, magna, aula, in a great hall, leves deos, the accusative of fickle gods, animum credulum, the accusative of a trusting spirit or trusting mind, and rebus laetes, the ablative case or dative, in this case dative, of happy circumstances or happy matters. So the first thing we need to do if we want to figure out what these endings that we see on these words mean is look them up and figure out what declension of noun we have here. So we look up Aula in our dictionary, and hopefully after a little bit of searching, we find Aula, aulae feminine. And you'll notice that second thing the dictionary gives us, aulae, tells us that this noun, again if we go back to our next slide, is first declension. So we look down below, we have deus, dei, masculine, the noun of our second noun adjective phrase, and that I in the genitive singular tells us that this is in fact a second declension noun. We look at animus animi. Oh, one other I. Here again, this is a second declension noun. And finally, we look at res rei. That EI of res rei tells us that this is a fifth declension noun, looking back at our list. So this helps us to interpret the endings that we see on these nouns in our translation. We have to have our endings for our noun declension simply memorized. But if we know what declension noun we have, we can identify its case and number and gender sometimes. And this is crucial information. It makes a difference whether your noun is nominative, the doer, or the accusative, the doee. It's an entirely different thing to say the man bites the dog than it is to say the dog bites the man. And it's those sorts of relationships that your endings tell you in Latin. Your nominative ending is the equivalent of er almost in English. Anything with a nominative ending is the biter. The accusative ending, well, that's kind of bitey. So it makes a difference whether you're biting or being bitten. So your endings are going to give you really useful and really crucial information. And remember, the adjectives are like little sycophants. They like to follow along after their nouns and imitate them in case, number, and gender. The ending they have may look different. It may not be the same actual letters, but those letters are going to mean the same thing as the endings on the noun mean, namely that they have the same case, same number, and gender. So let's put this into practice. You guys have all done this in your intro Latin classes. Let's practice with the first declension noun, aula, aulae. There are various ways of memorizing the endings for declining a noun. For this one, I find helpful the mnemonic, which is not my own, that the endings do in fact go to the battle hymn of the Republic. So if you memorize them in the standard order, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, you'll know that the endings go I, ma, I, misas, first declension, I, ma, I, misas, first declension, and so forth. But as you decline it, remember you're just going through the cases and you're listing the appropriate ending added to the base. The base is what you add endings to for a noun or an adjective. And the way that you find the base is important, especially when we get to nouns like third declension nouns where the nominative singular can be very weird. To be sure that you're adding endings to the right thing, go to your genitive singular, again, the second thing given in the dictionary, and take off the case ending. So in this case, we would ignore aula, and we would go to aulae. And the base that we're adding all of our endings to as we decline this noun is aul, what's left over after we take off our genitive ae. And remember too, when you're declining a noun, you're always given the first two answers in the dictionary. So the nominative singular is what you're given there up top. Genitive singular is what you're given second up top. And after that is when you need to write down aul the remaining 8 times for the remaining 8 cases and numbers. So just to go through this really briefly, we know our nominative is subject, genitive is possessor, dative, remember, is 2 or 4 indirect objects, and the ending is ae for first declension nouns. Accusative, we remember, is our direct object. In English, that means often it appears after the verb. Remember, the man bites the dog versus the dog bites the man. Whatever comes after bites is getting bitten, right? That's your accusative. That's what the accusative ending tells the Romans. Then remember our ablative, by, with, in, on, from, sometimes than. It's sort of our catch-all case. And then remember too, each of these endings has a plural equivalent. So however you choose to memorize these, I'd like you to practice them a little bit now. And I'm going to go back to the beginning of this, and I'd like you guys to just pause your playback of this video. And while it's paused, I'd like you guys to try to write out both the forms and the translations for the declension of this first declension noun, aula, aulae. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning. Nothing will be visible. And I'd like you guys to, again, stop your recording and decline aula, aulae now, reproducing exactly what was written on this slide. All right, so hopefully what you generated as you did this was, repeat after me, aula, aulae, aulae, aulam, aula, aulae, aularum, aulis, aulas, aulis. Did you get it right? Okay, let's make it a little bit complicated. We said that adjectives are like little sycophants. They follow their nouns around and flatter them by imitating their case, number, and gender. Let's start with an easy one. We said there are first, second declension adjectives, and that these show their gender by taking either masculine second declension endings, that us that you see up there in Magnus, feminine first declension endings, that a that you see on magna, or neuter second declension endings, that that you see on magnum. So if you have a first declension noun, like aula, aulae, and as they usually are, it's feminine, your adjective is just going to mimic the endings of the noun it agrees with. And remember, it's important to note that really what it's imitating is not the endings of its noun, but the case, number, gender. But when we see that F next to aula, aulae, that's telling us that this noun is feminine. And for an adjective like magnus, magna, magnum, that's saying, hey, choose this column of endings, magna, and just go down and add first declension endings to it. First declension endings for adjectives are always feminine. Not necessarily the case for nouns, but for adjectives, always feminine. So it's this F that tells us go down, magna, and just add the rest of your first declension endings. So what will we see when you do this? Well, looks familiar. We're declining hall, just as we did before. And notice we found our base, that is what we add our endings to for our adjective, by going to the feminine, and you should do this for any gender that you're declining the adjective in. And take off the A if the adjective is first, second declension. Sometimes the masculines do funny things, and when you're trying to figure out what that black part of the adjective is, you see how we've made our endings themselves blue, and we've made our base black. When you're trying to figure out what part of the word to keep and use as the base to add endings to, just go to the feminine, the form ending in A, and take off the A. And sometimes you'll be adding masculine endings to what's left over if your noun is, for example, masculine. But if you start with that form ending in A and take off the A, you'll be sparing yourself some problems a little bit down the line. All right. So again, why don't we do the same thing we did with Aula and just give you guys a chance to do this on your own. I'm going to rewind and make these disappear. And I'd like you guys to pause your video, try declining this on your own with translations, and then in a second, I'll lead you through the forms and we can see if we came up with the correct declension. All right, stop your video now. All right, how do you think you did? Let's go through our endings. We have Aula magna, aulae magni, aulae magni, aula magnum, aula magna, aulae magni, aularum magnarum, aulis magnis, aulas magnas, aulis magnis.